Aid deliveries have begun moving into the besieged Gaza Strip 2 weeks after the militant group Hamas rampaged through southern Israel and Israel responded with airstrikes. Israel says Hamas has freed 2 American hostages who have been held in Gaza since the war began October 7. Israeli airstrikes continue to hit southern Gaza and areas swollen by civilians who fled there from the north on Israeli instructions. The war, which is in its 15th day on Saturday, is the deadliest of 5 Gaza wars for both sides. The border crossing between Egypt and Gaza opened Saturday to let desperately needed aid to flow to Palestinians running short of food, medicine, and water in the territory that is under an Israeli siege. More than 200 trucks carrying roughly 3,000 tons of aid had been positioned near the crossing for days, waiting to head into Gaza. A 2-truck UN convoy that entered Gaza from Egypt is carrying over 44,000 bottles of drinking water from the UN Children's Agency, a day's supply for 22,000 people, according to UNICEF. UNICEF Executive Director Catherine Russell said, "This first limited water will save lives, but the needs are immediate and immense." The agency said it has supplies for up to 250,000 people at the Rafah crossing that can be brought into Gaza in a matter of hours. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has welcomed the first delivery of aid to the Gaza Strip since the start of war, but stressed that more is needed. He said in a statement that, with this convoy, the international community is beginning to address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza that has left residents of Gaza without access to sufficient food, water, medical care, and safe shelter. We urge all parties to keep the Rafah crossing open to enable the continued movement of aid that is imperative to the welfare of people of Gaza. He added, stressing that Hamas must not steal the aid or prevent it from getting to civilians who need it. Blinken said the US was still working with Israel and Egypt to arrange for dual US citizens to be able to leave Gaza via the Rafah crossing. Many Palestinians with foreign passports are gathered at the crossing but have not yet been allowed to cross. At a summit of world leaders in Cairo focused on ways to de-escalate the raging Israel-Hamas war, representatives from Arab and European nations called for more humanitarian aid to flow into Gaza and appealed for protection of civilians in the Strip. Several Arab leaders, including Egypt and Jordan, took the opportunity to castigate the international community over its inaction and a double standard they said that the world displayed on the devastating Israeli bombing campaign on Gaza. At the summit, Canada announced it would be sending an additional $50 million in humanitarian aid to help Palestinians in Gaza Strip and neighboring regions. A news release by Global Affairs on Saturday said the aid would be going toward providing food, water, medical assistance, and life-saving assistance to civilians in the area, ensuring that none of the money goes into the hands of Hamas. In the news release, Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly said it is critical that Palestinian civilians in Gaza who need life-saving assistance receive it as soon as possible. Canada will continue to work with its trusted and experienced humanitarian partners to make sure this funding reaches those who are suffering. Since Hamas's deadly attack on October 7, Canada has sent $10 million in humanitarian aid and organized 16 flights out of Tel Aviv to help evacuate Canadians and their family members. While there are more flights scheduled to leave Israel over the weekend, due to Rafah border closure, there is still no plan to get more than 400 Canadians in Gaza out. In Canada, 33 members of parliament penned a letter to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau calling for an immediate ceasefire in the name of innocent civilians on both fronts. Y Media conducted an exclusive interview with Robert Walker, Assistant Director of Honest Reporting Canada, to discuss the ongoing Israel-Hamas war and its geopolitical impact and possible solution. Here are some excerpts from the conversation.
I don't think that one has to be pro-Israel or pro-Palestinian. I think that the best way to be pro-Palestinian is by recognizing that their biggest source of suffering and oppression and death and poverty right now is Hamas. Hamas is an organization, as I said, that uses Palestinians as human shields, that redirects humanitarian aid instead of benefiting their own people. Right? There's never shortage of rockets they seem to have. Right? They're directing this aid to building these massive. Right? How do they build all of these this massive complex of tunnels underneath the Gaza Strip, where hostages are being kept, where rocket launchers are being kept, because this is concrete that was donated by the international community to build schools and houses and hospitals. And I think the world needs to look with a very critical lens to say, Hamas never seems to run out of weapons necessary to kill people. So I think that the best way to be supportive of the Palestinians is to recognize who their biggest oppressor is, and the one keeping under their thumb, and that's Hamas. And it's a horrific tragedy, and Hamas is only too happy to see thousands and thousands of Palestinians die for the sake of their cause. Ultimately, the solution here really is that I think the international community needs to do its utmost to make sure that the people of Gaza have their support to be able to, and Israel has the support to be able to rid Gaza of Hamas. Hamas as an ideology, is one thing. One can't necessarily kill an ideology through military means. But I think if we look at ISIS, right, 10 years ago, ISIS was it still is a terrifying, brutal group that was beheading men, women, and children throughout Syria and Iraq. And today there are still people, no doubt, in that region who are supportive of ISIS and their views, but they don't have the capability to be able to carry it out anymore. And I think that's the key difference here, is that when Israel is dealing with with ISIS or with Hamas, a group that, like ISIS, wants to kill every man, woman, and child, and there's no negotiation, there's no meeting halfway point, there's literally nothing under God's green earth that Israel can do to satisfy this bloodlust from Hamas. What is Israel forced to do? It literally has no choice. It's not a right, but it's an obligation that Israel has to ultimately distinguish and diminish, rather, Hamas's capabilities as much as possible. And tragically, this is not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a while. And because Hamas insists on hiding within densely populated civilian areas, Palestinian civilians have been hurt, have been killed, and undoubtedly more will be hurt and more will be killed. And when we see these videos and pictures of Hamas preventing Palestinians from getting out of densely populated areas because they don't want to be, in a war zone, it's a monstrous idea to imagine that Hamas is willingly, enthusiastically killing their own people. And I think that this isn't going to end until Hamas ultimately is gone, or gone to the point that it can't hurt anybody.
The Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry said Saturday that at least 4,132 people were killed in Gaza and 84 in the occupied West Bank since October 7. Some 14,000 have been wounded in Gaza and more than 1,400 in the West Bank. More than 1,400 people in Israel have been killed, mostly in the initial attack on October 7 when Hamas militants stormed into Israel. In addition, 203 people were believed captured by Hamas during the incursion and taken into Gaza, the Israeli ministry has said.